Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming to tonight's I Heart Utica festivities here at Mohawk Valley Community College. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. It's a real pleasure to see everyone, and I want you all to give yourselves a round of applause. This is the first annual I Heart Utica night, and we sold it out, so congratulations. Also want to give a thank you to Simple Props, who just did a great job performing for everybody. Yeah. And I want to welcome you all to the last portion of the show tonight, the Pulse of Utica panel discussion. First off, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Sam Familaro. For those of you who don't know me, I am honored and privileged to be moderating this wonderful panel. I am the host of the Uticast. It's a local podcast. You can get it for free every week on iTunes and also on SoundCloud and 315 Live and soon to be Stitcher because I don't like Android apparently. Now, I'm going to introduce everybody here in the panel. To my left, representing the Thinkubator, is Ryan Miller. You all know him from MV. And over here to the left as well is Emily Leo. She represents the Oneida Square Project. To my right, we have Chris Sunderland, who is with the Midtown Utica Community Center. And to my right, we have Lynn Michelini, who is the founder of Utica Monday Night, and she is awesome. So before we get too far in the panel, I just want to address everybody just for a moment. The reason we're all here tonight is to get behind all the wonderful local businesses and all the wonderful creative activities going on in this great city of ours. Now, for those of you who don't listen to the podcast, which I assume is most of you, we talk a lot about the time I spent in New York because much like a lot of people in this town, I didn't always love Utica. As a matter of fact, in 2007 and 2000, I couldn't wait to leave. I spent 7 years in New York City. I'll take a shot. And what I realized when I went down there is just because you leave someplace doesn't mean the problems that you have go away. They follow you to where you are. So, once I went to New York and realized that my problems would follow me there, I realized that it doesn't matter where you live, it just matters how you feel about life. And when I came back to Utica, I could sense a different vibe. There's a positivity that wasn't here before. And it really does seem to trickle down to all facets of our community. If you look at all the wonderful businesses here are doing wonderful, great things, I think that's awesome. All right, so let's get into the panel proper, and let's start with Chris Sunderland. Chris, you want to pick up the microphone here? It's very professional, right? Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first and how you got initially involved with the Midtown Utica Community Center?
So 6 years ago, my wife and I purchased a home in the neighborhood which we've coined as Midtown Utica. And shortly after that, an Episcopal church closed. And we approached the diocese to try and turn it into a community center.
Now, I saw you talking about that on your thing. That's a wonderful idea. I really, really enjoyed that. But where did you, what drove you to get into Midtown Utica, though? What was the, how did you initially get involved? Like, what drew you to the initial beginnings?
So growing up in Utica, I was always more comfortable with a multicultural setting and diversity. So when my wife and I were looking to buy a house, we were focused on inner city Utica. And for the 7 years, I worked as a teacher to adult ESL learners at the Refugee Center. And so I saw firsthand the need that they needed that far outstretched any other agency's capability of addressing.
So since how long ago has it been since Midtown Utica Community Center started?
We started on April Fool's Day 2014, so it'll be 2 years in a month.
Excellent, excellent. What would you say the biggest thing you would hope to achieve going forward is?
So we're still working on securing the facility, the building, which before that happens, we can't really secure solid programs or funding. So that's the first step.
Now, I do want to involve another panel guest here, Emily Leo. Emily, you are with the Oneida Square Project, and you also do a lot of work with the Relocation Center for Refugees.
Actually, we don't do too much work with the Relocation Center for Refugees, but what we are starting to see is refugees coming in our doors. And so being that we are a relocation center, we're going to see that more and more in the city of Utica, and we're just trying to, extend our reach and to be welcoming to anybody who it is that may come into the building at 500 Plant Street or into our neighborhood to make sure that they feel loved and welcome.
Now, I do want to keep this moderately light tonight, but while I have you and Chris here, I want to bring up a story that's been getting a little bit of traction. Earlier this week, a story about Utica made its way onto NPR. Long story short, a refugee from Thailand who had left at 18 tried to attend Proctor High School at the age of 19 and was told that she wouldn't finish before 21 and she was not allowed to attend the college. Now, the high school. Now, I want to ask you about your opinions on this, and Chris, I'd like to get your opinions on this as well. What do you think? What do you think about this, and what can we do to stop things like this from happening?
The one student that was on the radio for NPR was one of hundreds that for 7 years were systematically denied access to the schools. Let's step back, and I just want to say that the teachers in the Utica City School District are among the finest educators in the world. Hand for them. Amazing what they do. There's a few different moving parts to this. When a refugee is resettled to Utica and they're above the age of 16, they are given 5 years to graduate high school. If you come here with no formal education, and you're illiterate in your first language, it is very hard to pass all of the regencies you need in order to receive that diploma. If you're educated in English and you're completely fluent when you get here, and you are fully capable of achieving that, you can do it. And who's to say you can't if you are completely illiterate in English? So it's a case-by-case basis, and that's where the problem with the Utica City School District comes. For 7 years, it was systematically denying 17-year-olds and up from entering school, and there were other programs set up for them to utilize. So the that opened up this lawsuit in the past year opened up a larger story.
Emily, do you have anything you want to add?
I would just like to weigh in and say that, clearly there are other programs set up that would encourage, GED programs or other ESL courses that adults are able to take. And so I think that, of course, a high school education is deserved by a refugee resettling here. But I also see maybe the issues or where it could become problematic as people are becoming 22, 23 years old. So I think it's a tricky situation, and one in which, the school district uniquely is having to deal with above any other school district in the area because of the magnitude of refugees. So I think it's definitely something to be discussed, to be considered, but the particular situation in itself, I think, is a really hard one.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Emily. Chris, let's move on to something a little bit different and get away from that. Chris, you've been here a long time. You've probably been here long enough to see some of the best and some of the worst of Utica. How do you feel about the way the city is trending right now, and how do you feel about the direction it's taking going forward?
It's amazing. Growing up in Utica, I had the privilege of Lynn Michelinie's Utica Monday Night to look forward to every single summer.
Yes.
And it's a great feeling to think that had a huge impact on the area and where it's headed and the positive vibe it's made.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's move on a little bit. Emily, I'm going to give you the microphone so we can talk a little bit about the Oneida Square project. And before we get into that, let's tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, thank you. Again, I'm Emily Leo, and I was born and raised in Utica, New York. I ended up graduating from Sequoia High School, but my dad was the basketball coach at Proctor my whole childhood.
Nice.
And I kind of got the unique experience of having that dual childhood, partially in the suburbs and partially in the city. And what I love so much about Utica is the diversity. I really struggled actually in the suburbs, kind of leaving school and seeing kids who had Confederate flags on their trucks.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just kind of like felt a little bit out of place, you know? And so I'm so happy to be an adult and to be able to make the choice, you know, who I'm going to surround myself with now. It's not really the case sometimes when you're younger, you know, you're kind of around who you're around. So I'm happy to be in that situation now. So, but thanks, Mom and Dad, for moving me. I liked Sequoia too.
Well, no, it's a
But
good,
I do love Utica.
well, it's a great point. You know, I went to Proctor. I was a public school guy. My parents were public school teachers for 40 years. I do feel like going to a public school, going to a public high school, did give me a better feel for diversity in the, you know, in the community and in the greater community. You know, even when I went to
Absolutely.
New York, you would see people who were uncomfortable with other races, people of other cultures,
Yeah.
and I think Proctor specifically really laid a nice foundation for me to be, you know, to learn to accept other cultures as a whole.
Absolutely, and I'm so thankful to have kind of had that dual experience because I look at many of the people that I grew up with in Sequoia, and they just don't oftentimes, you know, have that experience
Exactly.
level, and I'm so happy to have
Yeah.
had it. So I started after college working at Kids Oneida.
Yes.
And following that, within the last year or so, I started working for the Oneida Square Project as well.
Now, for
And-
for people who don't know too much about it, can you give us a little background on what the
on
United
the
Square
Oneida Square
Project does?
Project.
Yes.
Absolutely. The Oneida Square Project was founded in 2010 by Pastor Mike Ballman and Cornerstone Community Church. And the main focus is really to just be good neighbors, to love the people around us, to help create jobs, to teach a trade, to you know, really focus on social justice and race reconciliation, neighborhood beautification. These are really our main focuses. And we actually now even have our own social enterprise, which is Oneida Square Public Art and Design. So if any of you have seen the beautiful mosaic trash cans,
Very wonderful.
you know, any of those kind of things, we're actually taking people who have significant barriers to employment, whether it be prior incarceration status, disability, or anything like this, and we're teaching them this trade, and a lot of them have had experience in construction or those things, and they're able to take their skill set and really hone in to a new art. And we're working on teaching them how to make these things and taking these broken things and making something beautiful. And so that's been a really great addition to the Oneida Square Project.
Yeah, and to a nice extent, too, little things like that, little changes make such a big difference. Once those
Absolutely.
mosaic trash cans went up, it really did change the way that street looked. You know, even go just to the, you know, Bag Square sign, they redid it, and it looks like $1 million. It really makes a huge difference, just little incremental changes along the way. So I watched a little bit of your video you did for Made in Utica, which all 4 of the panelists did, and they were all wonderful. If you haven't watched them, you should go watch them. One of the things you said is you felt that 2 of the biggest issues facing the city right now were poverty and segregation. Would you like to go a little bit farther into that? Do you have any-
Sure, absolutely. With both of my jobs, I see, you know, a lot of poverty, and that's something that creates such a barrier. You know, we often, you know, if you're privileged in any way, you often don't think about the way poverty can affect somebody's life. Yes, we're in America, and yes, there's a lot of opportunities, but when you're a child and you have lead poisoning, say, that can really affect your intellect, your ability to learn, your ability to move forward in so many ways, and I see that very often. And lead poisoning is just one factor that kind of goes hand in hand with socioeconomic status. And so, you know, not only that, but we see, you know, with poverty comes desperation.
Yes.
And, you know, there's a need to kind of do anything to get by. And so, you know, if we can work together to make some changes in our community so that people are, you know, learning how to do different trades, different skill sets, furthering their educations to try to end this cycle of poverty, I think that we're gonna come a long way in this area.
Similarly, what do you think, it's a tough question, I know I'm asking you to solve all the world's problems here. How do you turn the tide on something like this, I guess, is the question. That's a larger question in general, is what can you do to turn the tide on something like this? It's very tough to facilitate large-scale sea change in a community without activity. So
Absolutely.
I guess,
I think, well, I think education is huge. And then, the other part of it that I mentioned in the video was the segregation, and I didn't really go into that.
Yes.
I think that they're so interconnected because, like I said, our community is so diverse, but if you go to Proctor and you sit down in the lunchroom, everybody who looks the same sits together. And to me, that's so disheartening. I never want to be a person who, when you look at the people I surround myself with, all look the same as me, because I want to be able to learn from the different experiences and the different cultures of the people I surround myself with. And I think the more that we do that, the more we understand each other, the more those tides start to change.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Emily. That was wonderful. That was great. So let's move on to something a little bit lighter, shall we? That seemed like a lot. Let's move on to Lynn Michelini. Lynn, for those of you who don't know, but I'm sure you all do, was you were the founder, I guess you would want to call it, of Utica Monday Night. Before we get into that, Lynn, what were you doing in Utica before you got into Utica Monday Night? How did you get your start?
Well, I grew up in Sequoia.
Ah.
But I left, and I had grandparents in Utica, so I was blessed by having both worlds. I moved to Syracuse when I was 19 because I didn't want to work in a factory, and so I got my degree there and started in many businesses and sang in jazz clubs and acted in theater, and decided that we needed to have a place in Syracuse that was a little more like Soho. So artists and entrepreneurs, as we are today in Utica, got together and created Armory Square. And in 1990, my mom got ill, so I came home to take care of her, like as so many times the story here. And it was tragic for me to see what had happened to my town. I'd be downtown, and nobody knew the names of the streets, and nobody knew how to get to Cooperstown, and there were no people. They didn't know where parks were. So I had a job, but I kept wondering what to do about this, if we could do anything, because I was missing Armory Square. And so in 1996, I was working at a place that didn't take up a lot of my time, at least my mental time. And so I conceived of this idea of doing an Armory Square in the ether, essentially doing it in a kind of a theatrical mode where we used all of the parks and all of the streets and all the buildings were empty, and creating musical themes and historic themes and heritage themes, and timing it differently so it actually looked on Monday night like people were walking around a real city. And I'm delighted by Chris's comment, because the reward for something like this, and there were 45 different groups we worked with, 50 volunteers, for 15 years people sacrificed Monday nights. It wasn't much of a sacrifice because we were having a great time, but it's very rewarding to think that we were instrumental in influencing this generation's feeling about this fabulous city that has such potential, and so many young people and people in the 30s that are not, that's when you got any money to start up the businesses that you're dreaming about. But, people like success, and there are so many more believers, and there's so much more energy and a belief, I think, that people are succeeding. So I probably can succeed in the city now. And that is, of course, true. And hopefully, this will continue till we've filled up the city from Mohawk Street to Varick and from Oneida Square to Bagg Square, with exciting entrepreneurial endeavors that really make this the kind of city that people want to come and visit when they go to the cultural corridor that we never got off the ground, which is Old Forge, Cooperstown, Sylvan Beach, and our historic Revolutionary War Trail sites.
Lynn, what do you think, as the longest tenured Utican, I'll put it that way.
That's nice.
That's nice. You like that? What do you think the biggest thing we're lacking culturally in the city right now is? It's a tough question, I know.
Lacking culturally. Well, you know, I have to say, I lived in Syracuse for 25 years, and Utica always, even at its lowest point, was more cosmopolitan than Syracuse ever was or probably will be. And why is that? Diversity. It's always been wonderful. We've got the greatest food. You look around now and all the restaurants that you can see, even if you're not interested in diversity from the standpoint of what we're talking about of exchanging and building bridges and things of that nature, you can eat in this city and learn something about cultures. And I think that that's probably the greatest thing that we've got going for ourselves.
Wonderful. Lynn, I want to ask you a little bit about the Levitt Grant. This is earlier this year, Utica was named one of 15 cities to win grant money to create free outdoor concert series. You received $25,000 in matching grants, and you're going to be doing work at the Great Lawn at Rutgers Park in the Historical District?
Right. So but basically, I got invited to be a part of this team because of my experience with Monday night. Not much has changed because we're trying to, we picked another site that needs to be addressed because it's not in the best neighborhood, but the project of restoring all of these fabulous mansions, which the Landmark Society is trying to do, is so incredibly hopeful because this will put us on a trail of historic mansions when it's completed. It's multi-million dollars worth of work to do. And nothing has changed about, you know, the music scene. It's $25,000 is not enough, so we're out trying to raise more money. And we've got great people and wonderful team that are going to be promoting it. And it should be an exciting, I think we're starting on the 22nd of June. We'll have opening acts and national acts and as diverse as we can possibly afford.
As a longtime Utica musician, I spent a lot of time playing in bands growing up. I do have to say, I watched a lot of the important venues for local musicians close down when I was, before I left the city. I don't know if she's still here. Where's Robin? Where's Robin from the Tram? Robin from the Tram was very, specifically for us early on, establishing local punk music,
to be,
especially, but even if you go back to the era when Virgo Bats was still a place and when Captain Trips was open, there was a lot more original local music. Do you see that turning around at all?
Well, I think it's cyclical, actually. I believe I had a band, a commercial band in the 70s, and we'd go out, and every place that was a joint had live, wonderful music. And that kind of went down in the 80s, and then when we started Monday night, the whole premise was if you're going to have a community that thrives on its art and music, you have to pay the musicians as much as you pay the plumber. And that was something we did, and I'm very proud of the fact that we really employed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of musicians. Robin, the Dev, and what's going on in Varick Street is exciting at the moment. Robin has always maintained the music, and it's not a big moneymaker. It's much harder to do now than it was years ago, and I think that's a major problem.
Well, that's what stands out with places like, if you look at a place like the Dev, you know, Tim, who's a big supporter of local music, Tim Schramm at the Dev, he will pay to have an original band come in out of nowhere, and maybe it won't draw people that a cover band would draw, but it is going to draw a different crowd and bring a little more culture that we wouldn't normally see in that area, and I think that's great. Lynn, excellent. You're the best.
Thanks.
Love you, Lynn. Give it up for Lynn Michelini. All right, I'm going to steal that mic from you, Lynn. Thank you very much. And I'm going to hand it to my bearded compadre here on the left. For those of you who don't know Ryan Miller, you should, because he is a very important gentleman in this community. Oh, thank you. I think. And you're very handsome, too, I can say that. Ryan is the director of the Thinkubator, which is currently on 106 Genesee Street. You are moving to a new location in April. Of all the things that were up here tonight, I got to tell you, I know you probably the closest. We've hung out outside of this. I've seen you at Nail Creek once or twice.
We've had beers together.
Once or twice.
Yes.
The Thinkubator is a wonderful project, but it's probably the hardest project to define of all the things that are up here. So for those people who don't know much about the Thinkubator, how could we make this easy for people to understand what the Thinkubator actually does for people?
Well, I would say the Thinkubator is we're building the plane as we're flying it, as I like to tell people. So the Thinkubator exists to help people that are students or folks in the community that have an entrepreneurial bend, or they want to investigate, could I start a business? Does this business idea have legs? Our job is to not tell you if that's a good idea or a bad idea. We try to put you through the paces, get you the contacts that you need and the resources that you need and the testing mechanisms that you need to figure this out. So our job is to really try to grow businesses that not only start here, but will stay here, I guess, in essence, right?
Well, I guess what makes me curious about this, how long ago did you guys start the Incubator?
It's been around for almost 2 years now, and I came on board about 9 months ago.
What were you doing before this? Because you've been so influential for your Incubator. I feel like you're almost like the face. When I see the Incubator, I see you out there. What were you doing beforehand that you were doing that drew you into this?
Posting a lot on social media.
Yeah,
right?
you love social media.
I was working for an ad agency, Romanelli Communications in Clinton.
Oh, yeah.
And so my job there was really kind of, frankly, specializing in digital storytelling, like, doing some web development and then helping businesses tell their story online. So that was really what I was spending my days doing. And so I think it was a natural kind of fit for me to go and do this role at Think, because inherently I like to promote and I like to connect, and that's a lot of what I do.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. What would you say so far has been the biggest success from the Incubator, and alternately, what's been the biggest struggle?
Oh, okay, so I'm not going to give a company as the biggest success.
Of course.
But I would say that I would view the biggest success is that I think we're doing a good job of trying to demonstrate to people and draw people out of different areas of the city and showing them that there is a creative class in Utica. There are people that are making things, that have ideas, that want to build something here. And the act of connecting those people, I think, has been our biggest success, and I would argue is the biggest value that we will probably bring to this community. Biggest challenge?
Biggest challenge is tough, I know.
For Thinkubator? Or
Yeah, for
city?
Incubator specifically.
So, we're not a traditional accelerator. When you look at other accelerators and incubators across the state, they're interested primarily in what we call hockey stick growth, like highly scalable tech companies, right? I don't think that we're there yet. I think we have a great amount of very creative people, but I have not seen a ton of people working on these businesses that are going to go, billion-dollar valuations. Now, that creates a problem. You're dealing with venture capital and trying to get those dollars into a community, right? So that's the challenge. I think we can get there, but it's going to take us some time, and we're going to need some runway to do it.
As I mentioned earlier, there was all these videos that you guys did for the Made in Utica stuff. I watched one of your videos. When you said something that really stuck with me that I think is interesting. I believe the quote was, unless you're opening a pizza place, if you start a business in Utica, you're probably the first person to do it.
Yeah, so that's not my quote.
That's not your quote.
I stole that.
You stole it.
It was
He's
from
a thief,
a gentleman I'm working with at Think, Matt Van Slyke, who runs a great organization called Utica Bike Rescue. And I thought just it was a really valid point, when you think, there not only is there are there a lot of people with creative ideas, but there's so much opportunity to get in and try something unique here, because it probably, either hasn't been done in a long time or it hasn't been done at all. So there's a lot of opportunity to get out there and be the first to do something. Yeah?
Yes, I agree with that.
Like a podcast,
Like
so
a
to speak,
podcast,
right?
I know. Every week, folks, free on iTunes, You also had another quote that I find very funny, and this is actually very common. This is a common feeling. They asked you what the biggest challenge for the city was, and you just responded, quote,
Haters.
haters.
Yeah.
Haters. I think that actually speaks to a larger point, and I touched upon it very early on. For a long time, the stigma with Utica was, last night at Utica, turn the lights off, right? That was the line. That's what everyone said. And it really does feel like there is a large shift in perspective. But I also think to a certain extent it's important to not just be blindly positive, but to also be realistic, right? Yeah. And you have to border that line pretty it's tough.
You got to qualify. Hey, yeah. So I think the stigma of Utica before. So here's the thing, and I think that we, the people that are engaged, the people that are in this room, there has been a collective decision, I believe, in this city that we have decided that we are not going to follow that narrative anymore. So I don't think, like, we're seeing this kind of economic resurgence and everything, but I really believe that it's been a conscious decision that we're going to change the narrative, and we've just decided as a community that we're not going to be defined by that anymore.
Exactly.
You know, I think it's in many ways simple as that. When you go and talk to someone, if you go to New York, right?
I've never been there.
You've never been there. So if you go to New York and I said, Sam, what do you think of New York? You're going to be greatest city in the world, right? Maybe, all right?
New York is the greatest and also worst city in the world for all the reasons that are there.
Okay,
It's
but
both. It's everything.
Just follow this line of
I am
thinking.
going with it. I'm
okay?
with you.
Follow
Go
this
ahead.
line. You know, that is, when you think of New York, stereotypically, like New York, right? It's America's city. And I think that's a narrative that the city has adopted.
Yes.
They have projected that out. And I believe, fundamentally, that we have the opportunity to do the same thing. We can decide what we want that narrative to be, and that will attract the kinds of people that want to be part of that story.
Well, and that's actually something that Lynn brought up in her video. Utica has a large amount of authenticity to it.
Yeah.
It is a very singular place. I don't know a lot of other suburban towns, and I've been to a lot. I've played in a bunch of crummy bands. I've seen suburbs that have this kind of character and this kind of diversity, and it really is nice, and it really is singular.
Well, so just to just piggyback on the haters thing, like I don't want to simplify that, because I totally agree. I think that we have massive challenges here, massive challenges, specifically, you know, with poverty, and we have a lot of issues that we have to deal with. But it's still part of what we are, but we still have to work to solve those things. I think when I just say haters, it's because we have a lot of people that are they're working their asses off to make this community better. I mean, if you look around tonight, you've got people, I mean, in many ways, this is a celebration of entrepreneurs, right? You've got, like,
Oh, yes.
Robin and Michelle and Tim and Heather. These are people that have stuck it out, number one. Number two, they have shown us what it's like to hustle and to build a business here with dignity, and to help people along the way. It's not like they're building a factory and sucking money out. Like, the businesses that I think of that are the essence of what this city is are the businesses that are small and that they give back. And we got a lot of those.
One of the recurring jokes we talk about a lot on the show is we always refer to Utica as Second Chance City, because you can just always keep trying. But one of the things I appreciate about this town more than most places, this is not necessarily a town or a region where people are going to hand you anything. If you have an idea, if you have a creative thought, if you have a product, if you have a business, if you can do it, people will rally behind you. People like watching other people succeed in this area, but no one is going to hand you anything. And I think that's been the big shift, is people who have ideas now are really going out and pushing and really making it reality, and that's been a big difference. Ryan, you are accepting TEDx speakers. You've been involved with the TEDx program. Want to talk a little bit about that as well before we move on?
We're doing TEDx for the 4th year, and it's going to be here at MV in September. And I think, you know, our goal with that was obviously TED. If you're not familiar with it, you can just go to TED.com. A lot of people have probably seen TED Talks. It was an opportunity for us to not only do an event that we thought could be, a world-class event here in Utica, but the idea was to try, what would happen if we got 100 people that were diverse, but were all interested in being inspired and meeting one another, right? Like, what would that do for the area? So the speakers are great. I think they inspire people, but the real mission behind it is getting a diverse group of people together that have never met each other to experience something.
This is all very intense.
Sorry.
This is nice. No, it's good. I like it. It's important.
My elevator pitch, man.
So, guys, let's move on to something that's a little more fun, and this will be a little more entertaining, I think, for you folks. We're going to do, I'm going to hand the mics off to you guys here. Now, you guys can share this mic, and I'm going to let you guys share this mic. I'm going to ask you guys some Utica-based questions. These are going to be a little bit more fun, and then we'll go from there, okay? So this is the first question. It's a theoretical question. You can only have one. Tomato pie, Utica greens, chicken riggies. Make your argument.
Chicken riggies.
Tomato pie.
It's tough,
so
right?
Hard. It's so hard.
It's a tough question.
I love them all. All right, tomato pie.
Greens.
Greens. All right, I'm going to give you guys, this is a hot take. I'm going to get a lot of heat for this. Greens are overrated. I'm sorry. I'm just saying it. I know, boo, they're booing me over there in the back. I'm saying. All right. Another question. A lot of these are food-based, guys. We like food in Utica. Did you notice that? I don't know if you guys saw the whiteboard that was going around in the back here where people were taking pictures of all the things they love about Utica. I got to tell you, 80% of the people put food. We had to tell people to stop putting it. We said, put something else, for God's sakes, please. That being said, we're going out to dinner, guys, and each one of you is going to get to choose where we're going. If you have one choice to get dinner, where are we going, guys, and why?
You can go first. Can we duplicate?
Solitary Joe's.
Yes. I'm sorry. Wait. That's the sign of a true Utican, folks. If you know what Solitary Joe's is, you are a champion. Bravo, Lynn. Thank you.
I'm going to just take it then. I'm going to go to Tim's place. I'm going to go to Taylor, Tim the cook, right? I know it's yeah.
Excellent. Just trying to put over Tim, I see.
I'm a mama's boy, so I'm going home.
Smart. See, that's also a highly Utica answer. I'm going to my mom's house. Emily?
You're going to make me look bad that you just said that. If I can't go home, I'm going to Giorgio's.
Oh. I got to tell you, this is a tough one, but if I'm dying on the sword out here, I'm going to Karam's. I'm Middle Eastern. Yes! Right. You know what I'm talking about. Someone bring me a meat pie. That's what I'm looking for. All right. Okay. All right. Stranger walks up to you, and he asks you what the best bar in the city to get a drink is. What do you tell him?
Solitary Joe's.
So excited about that. No one else wants to take it? You got to take it.
Well, I need
Green
to know what
onion.
kind of experience they want.
Well, what kind of experience do you like? This is your bar.
Well, then fine. I'm going to tell them to go to Stiefvater so they can dance.
Nice.
Yeah, I'll second Steve Potter's.
All right.
I'm going to tell him Nail Creek or the Onion.
Nail Creek.
Yeah.
As you know, I am a homebody, so I would say my front porch more often than not. But since I do live in South Utica, I'm known to stumble my way to the Green Onion and then stumble my way home. It's walking distance. All right, this is the one that I'm the most excited about. I came up with this last night when I was trying desperately to come up with. Right? This one might take a minute. Theoretically, Utica needs a new slogan, and you four have to write it. So, I'm going to give you all a chance to come up with a new slogan for Utica, New York. Who wants to start? Go ahead, Ryan.
Watch your back, Brooklyn.
Ooh, my heart. Oh, my hipster friend.
City on its way to greatness.
Come visit us. We're delicious.
That's good.
Kind of stealing from Lynn. Utica, a city that's already great. How's that?
Very nice work, guys. Utica, we have one podcast, the Uticast. It's free on iTunes and also on SoundCloud. All right, speaking of which, I'm not going to keep putting over my show, but I am going to steal this idea. This is something we do on the show all the time. We're going to play a little game here to close out the night. I know we have a little bit of time, but we'll see how this goes out here. We're going to play overrated, underrated, okay? I know, this is a tough one. And we're going to start with some classic Utica events. We have one coming up March 12th, down Genesee Street, St. Patrick's Day Parade. Overrated or underrated?
Totally underrated. Whoa. No, you don't like it?
Okay, I just found out I was Irish, Well, a couple years ago, I thought I was English and Lebanese. So now it's a good thing.
I'm not Irish.
Do you want to take it or do you got it? You go first. I'm going to say 20-year-old me says underrated and 34-year-old me says overrated.
That's a great answer.
I'm Italian through and through. Overrated.
As a Syrian guy, I have no representation at the. As a Syrian guy, like shamrocks scare me. I don't like Guinness all that much. It's tough for me. I don't.
But I will tell you this, St. Joseph's Day, March 19th,
Joseph's Day,
in
very good.
Esfinge is underrated.
All right.
I'm not getting it.
Well, you might as well keep the mic because this one actually relates mostly to you, I want to say. This was something that was added to Utica not too long ago. It got a lot of bad press initially. Now I think people are coming around on it. The Utica Roundabout, overrated or underrated?
Underrated.
Underrated.
Most beautiful cities have a roundabout, and now we have one too. Underrated.
Totally agree. Underrated.
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 You know, it took me like months to understand how it worked. First off, as I mentioned, I didn't drive for like 7 years, so having to come home and learn that I couldn't drive down Court Street anymore and that I had to go around a big circle, it was very tough. And I'm a historically bad driver. I got in a car accident on Elizabeth Street. Some lady ran a red light and smashed into me. Tough one. Don't ever go down Elizabeth Street unless you want to go to get your car fixed. All right. I have one more over and under for you guys, and then I know we're a little bit early, but I guess we can open it up for questions if anyone has anything as well afterwards. And this is a very easy one. The first and hopefully annual I Heart Utica Day. Overrated or underrated?
Underrated.
Underrated.
About what I expected.
Underrated.
I think the fact that we had so many wonderful businesses here and so many members of the community, I can't think that this was anything but underrated, and I cannot wait to do this again next year. I don't know about you guys. Now, before we close up for the night and let you guys go home to your family and friends and lovers and all that, I'll open up the floor to any questions. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask to Emily or Ryan or Chris or Lynn? Don't be shy, folks. All right, come on, Justin Parkinson. Matter of fact, also, let's give it up for Justin Parkinson and Made in Utica.
You get a microphone? The microphone's a nice touch. I didn't really need it. I guess the question's just for the four of you from a personal level, not necessarily your business or what you're affiliated with. As a human, what are your highlights and your lowlights of Utica? And just kind of give us a little bit of story behind them, if you could.
That was rude. Highlights and lowlights. Highlights are always going to be family and food for me. I know everyone keeps talking about food, but honestly, I love Utica because the people I love are here, and there's nothing better than that. So that's a highlight. A lowlight, I would love to see more small businesses and businesses in general staying open later, restaurants staying open later, coffee shops, those kind of things, because sometimes you don't want to go to a bar and you want to go somewhere, and so that I think is a lowlight and something that we could work on.
I don't know, I got to think about this. Do you have one, Lynn?
When I was doing Utica Monday Night, which I did for 15 years, I had the most incredible experiences of feeling cared about, loved, appreciated by the most wonderful people in the world, and I felt exactly the same way about them. This was a time when the negativity was overwhelming, when people did not come into the city because they thought so many of the things that are, unfortunately, and sometimes are still here, but that it was dirty, unsafe, and not representing what they wanted to be like, which was mostly the suburbs, and it was buoying for all of us who were taking a big jump into trying to help get a kickstart on the city to get us where we are today. So I guess my answer is that I love it here, and I love the people in it. We are so generous and so caring. It takes a community to raise a child, but it also takes a community to make the rest of us feel like we're a part of something good. And I think that's the best thing about my hometown. I got to say something bad after that.
Yeah.
I won't make it.
I really don't.
Just go to winter. Probably winter, right?
No, I really wish that people, now we have some really good marketers now, I will say. When I came back here, nobody knew how to market. And I had this conversation with Joe. We're talking about in the 90s. So we have great people that are marketing, but in order for people to sell this town, they have to be informed of things that are going on. So I wish that more people did more things, the word out and what was happening, what their dreams and delights were, and helping us move all the good news forward. I didn't mean to say good news. I got the good news. That isn't what I meant.
Well, and actually, I'm glad you said that because, Ryan, you actually brought this up to me not too long ago. One of the things I think is important is not just appealing to the local community, but finding a way to import more customers and more people into the community to have a reason to draw people here and not just, I don't want to use the word placate, but just to appeal to a specific sector of this small community. There's got to be a way to draw people here as well. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Chris.
I want to say something
Sure.
to that. To
Please,
that
go
idea.
ahead.
You know, politically speaking, we're all about improving cities across the thruway. But I always had a different outlook, and I tried to promote the idea of the cultural corridor. The discretionary dollars that are available in Cooperstown and in Old Forge are enormous for a city that is imbued with a very large amount of poverty and kind of mediocre wages, even for those of us who are being very, very productive. And I think that if the new marketers or the people that are promoting things begin to attach ourselves north to south rather than to the other failed cities or cities that are trying just as hard as we we would pick up some of the people that are going to come through the thruway and go this way and then maybe drive back through Utica and go down to Glimmerglass. It's an incredible amount of traffic that we need to capture.
Very good. Very cool.
Highlight.
Highlights and lowlights, my friend.
I'd say the people, like Lynn mentioned, the unconditional love that this area gives. If you visit Utica, you're not staying in a hotel. Yeah, at least the people I know. If you're coming to visit me, you're staying at my house. If you stay at a hotel, it's an insult. If you want to go to dinner, you go over your aunt's house and have dinner. You don't need to announce that you're coming. You just go, you open the door, you're there. So the love of the area, the love that the culture perpetuates would be a highlight.
Wonderful.
Low light. Potholes.
Potholes.
There's a lot fewer now than there were 10 years ago, but potholes.
Yeah, tell my car that. We'll see how that goes.
Highlight and low light. Highlight, I would say, just personally, I think if you want to do something here, you can kind of do it, or you can find someone that'll help you do it. I think that's, if you want to try to do something, no matter what it is in Brooklyn, there's a ton of people, but there's a ton of competition. And and I don't mean that just from like a business perspective. I just mean like a project or an initiative. Like you can be the podcast guy in Utica just by saying, I'm going to do a podcast. Right?
I tried to be the podcast guy in Brooklyn. It did not work.
Right? So
I got to tell you.
I think that's, if you want to try to get something started, it's easy to get something started. Lowlights, I would say, okay, so I think the lowlight would be, in some ways, there's a lot of people here that I feel like have not had the opportunity to live up to their full potential. And I like maybe they just haven't found the right job or they haven't found the right career opportunity, and they're just not able to just absolutely go out and kill it. I think that's a challenge here, and I think that's a low light because I know a lot of people that moved away and they want to come back, but they can't find a gig.
Yeah, I know how that goes.
So I think that's maybe a low light. And then the only other low light would be we love to like stuff, like from social, like we love to like stuff, and we love to be interested in stuff, but we're not as good as showing up.
You know what,
so,
though? I'm glad you brought that up.
You know
It's
what I
something I
mean?
wanted to talk about. About 10 years ago, if you put up a negative comment about Utica on social media or that black hole topics that exist in the world, you would get people rallying behind the negativity. Now, I've noticed if you see someone put something negative about the city, lambasted by the rest of the community. And that sort of ties into what we had talked about a lot, this sea change and this movement of positivity. And this is something I do want to say before we leave. Positivity isn't just something you can talk about. You either have to feel that way or you don't, but it doesn't mean you have to be unrealistic. That doesn't mean that we have to be negative about everything, but just look around the way things are going. If it feels like things are moving forward, it's because it probably is true. And I just want to say, it really does feel like a whole new city. It really does feel like we're moving in the right direction and things are moving forward. Guys, I want to thank everybody who is up here at the panel. Let's give a big round of applause for Lynn Michelini, Chris Sunderland, Ryan C. Miller, Leo. Before we go, folks, I just want to shout out a couple people who've done phenomenal work here tonight. First off, I want to thank Erica Karak and Bill Dustin from the Mohawk Valley Community College Cultural Series for putting in tons and tons and tons of work here. I want to thank all the great vendors. There were so many that I can't even pretend to remember how many were here to begin with, but everyone here is doing such wonderful things, so round of applause for them as well. Shout out to the boys from Simple Props. Yeah, great work tonight. This is my simplest prop. It's a cup of coffee. Also want to shout out everybody at Made in Utica for helping to put this on, specifically Katie Riley. Katie, you've done so much work tonight, and she hates when I point her out and make people clap for her because it makes her uncomfortable, so clap louder. Folks, thank you guys for spending so much time with us tonight. We really appreciate everyone showing up, and we appreciate selling out the show. For those of you who don't know, my name is Sam Familaro. You can listen to our podcast for free on iTunes, SoundCloud. It's called the Uticast. Folks, thank you very much. Good night, Utica. We love you very, very, very much. Thank you.